Mechanical Men Walk and Talk. Popular Science Monthly, December 1928. Upon the rostrum sat a large and awesome figure, not unlike the giant warrior of brass atop the mountain in Scheherazad's tale. But this huge monster had the cold white sheen of tin, and the experienced eye could tell that aluminum was his substance. With his armor-plated chest, arms and legs, and sharp metal joints at the knees, he seemed like a grotesque enlargement of the knights in armor that frighten elderly lady visitors in museums. The thing's enormous size and the stark immobility of his face gave him a really terrifying quality. His lipless, toothless mouth agape, his hollow eyes aslant, he stared into an audience that packed the Royal Horticultural Hall in London. Fairly pop-eyed, they returned his lifeless gaze. They felt subconsciously that here was some strange symbol of relentless fate itself. Their wonder mounted to amazement when, with a grinding, creaking noise, the figure rose and moved his stiff arms in a superfluous gesture asking for silence. Suddenly, the black, dead eyes became alive with a ghastly yellow light, and then he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a rumbling voice. "Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, it gives me great pleasure." The spell was broken. True, the voice had an unearthly sound, but the pronunciation was that of the typical educated Englishman, and the words were the time-honored commonplaces uttered by presiding officers the world over. In such novel fashion, the recent model engineering exhibition was opened in the British capital. A scientist of note had promised to preside, but a few days before the opening date, word was received that he would not be able to appear. It was then that Captain W.H. Richards conceived the idea of constructing a man of metal to do the job. This creature not only would take the place of the defaulting chairman, but serve as a most appropriate feature for the engineering show. He set to work quickly and christened his aluminum creation Eric. Eric moved and had his being through the means of an electric motor, electromagnets, pulleys, and levers concealed in his body. For raising him from his seat, causing him to bow to the audience and resume his chair, another motor was concealed in the platform under his feet. Ingenious electrical instruments, a jealously guarded secret of his inventor, enabled Eric to hear questions and answer in a human voice. In large lettering on Eric's breastplate appeared the initials RUR, short for Rossum's Universal Robots, which years ago formed the title of a fanciful play by Karel Čapek, the Czechoslovakian playwright, in which his robot was a machine apparently endowed with human powers and human thought. Čapek it was who gave the world the much-needed word robot as the name for a working automaton. Only a few days before Eric's weird antics, another sensation was caused in the West End of London by the appearance in the streets of a walking robot, taken for a stroll by his inventor, Captain J.A. Roberts. Earlier still, the Televox, another mechanical creature constructed by R.J. Wensley, an engineer of the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company, had astonished a group of engineers in New York by answering the telephone and doing sundry other chores. Still another, demonstrated soon after the appearance of Televox, was the product Intergraph, developed at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cambridge, by Dr. Vannevar Bush, professor of electrical power transmission, and his assistants. This marvelous contrivance was described by Dr. Bush as an adding machine carried to an extreme in its design. But the modest professor didn't go far enough. It is the nearest approach ever made to a thinking machine. And the last word in the mechanical man or robot principle was spoken recently when the New York Edison Company opened a new automatic power distributing station. A plant with an ultimate capacity sufficient to light the homes of from 200,000 to 300,000 families. A good-sized city. Yet one that hasn't a human being in it, but is controlled by an operator 3 miles distant. The output of this manless plant is 32,000 horsepower, or about 320,000 manpower. In other words, the lone human operator at his switchboard 3 miles away is really the commander-in-chief of an army of 320,000 mechanical workmen, the absentee nurse of legions of docile, eminently useful robots. Here is a development of which Capek never dreamed in his wildest fancy. Though somewhat different in principle and application from the Televox idea, a similar power sets in motion the Edison robot army, cooped up in a small one-story building in uptown New York to supply light and power. The manless plant is controlled through telephone wires over which a series of electrical impulses is sent. These impulses operate a relay in the station. The relay in turn causes the controlled control board to transmit the order contained in the electrical impulses to the apparatus in question. Likewise, in case any change occurs in the apparatus, for instance, if a feeder going to the consumer becomes overloaded or develops a short circuit, the circuit breaker opens, and immediately a signal indicating this is flashed over the telephone wires to the controlling board, where the lighting of a lamp and the accompanying ringing of a bell call the operator's attention to the fact that something is amiss. Robots in real action. Robots lighting your lamps and heating your wife's electric iron and oven. Would you have believed it 10 or even 5 years ago? But that is not all. Soon after the opening of the manless Edison station in New York, Wensley, inventor of Televox, before the delegates to the American Electric Railway Association in Cleveland, demonstrated the feasibility of manning streetcars with speaking mechanical creatures, fashioned of copper veins, porcelain bones, and with insulated wires for a nervous system, and vacuum tubes for vital organs. A week or two later, the claim was made in England that 40% will be saved in the cost of labor through a machine which lays 180 yards of railway track in an hour, or relays 4 miles in a single night. The device was tried experimentally by the London and Northeastern Railway Company. Among its features are a circular saw for the automatic trimming of sleepers, an engine which generates its own electricity, and searchlights. An official of the company declared that the track-laying machine bodily picks up a section of old track 16 feet long, deposits it on the train, carries forward a new section, and gently lowers it into the position where the old track was. Another robot with a vengeance. Shortly afterward, an anti-aircraft robot gun, which computes and holds its range against invading aircraft, was used for the first time in a sham war staged at the 10th annual meeting of the Army Ordnance Association at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, and astonished nearly 10,000 spectators. The new gun is set in action by sound waves from the approaching enemy plane, which thus, in a sense, commits suicide when coming within its range. And also very recently, a peaceable robot did a neat job when Televox started the operation of a new $31 million sewage disposal plant of the city of Chicago. Wensley's Televox, as the name indicates, is a mechanism which can be operated by a voice from a distance. The control of mechanism from afar by means of electrical circuits is a familiar operation. A very faint electrical impulse will affect an electromagnet, which, by moving its armature over a small distance, can be made to release energies waiting for the signal to get into action. Such an impulse may be conveyed either by direct wires, as in the case of the Edison robot plant, or by wireless. Thus, boats have been steered without a pilot, automobiles driven safely through traffic without a human driver, and even airplanes flown without an aviator at the control lever. These feats, however, have been mere demonstrations of possibilities. For general industrial application, they are as yet too expensive and too uncertain. Wireless cannot be relied upon to work perfectly at all times, and the cost of setting up and maintaining a wire circuit over any considerable distance where it is used only occasionally is prohibitive. But telephone wires go almost everywhere. And in the Televox, Wensley solved the engineering problem of utilizing the vibrations of the human voice transmitted electrically over a telephone wire and exploiting their power at the receiving end to produce oscillations in an electrical circuit. And now, 3 of these robots, stationed at 3 reservoirs which hold the water supply of the city of Washington, report to their chiefs in the War Department, whenever called upon to do so, the depth of the water in their respective reservoirs. In the same city is the great brass brain of the Coast and Geodetic Survey, and it is surely one of the most useful robots in existence. To it every day, men put questions about the future, which it answers with such precision that tens of thousands risk their lives and untold millions of wealth are staked upon the accuracy of its forecasts. It predicts the tides for every port in the world for years ahead. The great brass brain is a form of harmonic analyzer, operating mechanically instead of electrically. It occupies a space 11 feet long, 6 feet high, and 2 feet wide, and does without error labor which otherwise would require 50 to 100 human computers, working continuously and subject to the inevitable percentage of human errors. Have your thinking done while you wait. The product Integraph of Dr. Bush of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is a robot performing this startling function. Where workers in the business world ordinarily are satisfied with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of numbers, the engineer deals with curves and graphs which represent for him the past, present, and future of the things in which he deals. In other words, whereas the ordinary adding and calculating machines are limited to handling definite numbers or constants, the new invention deals with those indefinite and inconstant qualities known as variables. These are quantities whose changing values depend on other variable quantities. Strange to say, the mechanical brain of the Integraph, which solves in a few minutes problems so complex that it would take an engineer from a month to a year to work them out, resembles nothing so much as the electric meter in your home. It performs its thinking processes and reaches its solutions by running as a motor, translating the problem into terms of electric power and expressing the answer in the same manner. And so the age of the robots is now really upon us. Perhaps Carol Kapik, in surveying the modern industrial scene, is more surprised than any of us by the manner in which his fanciful prediction, in a sense, has come true. But the robots of his play were very different from the obedient, useful mannequins described here. Docile slaves of man at first, they finally rose in revolt against their masters and exterminated humanity, subsequently perishing themselves, since they had no power of reproduction and wore out in time, like any other piece of machinery. Such a disastrous development is, of course, out of the question in the case of the robots of science. But will they ever become so perfected, and will their numbers so increase that they will destroy the necessity for human labor? In the light of present knowledge, that seems not at all likely. A writer of philosophic tales once told of a man who gradually grew crazier and crazier tending one of those intricate mathematical machines, and hoping each day that his mechanical servant would make a mistake. Many years went by, and his hopes remained unrealized. Every sum was fatally right. Finally, the catastrophe came. A cog or two flew out, and the machine reported automatically a whole series of results most gratifyingly erroneous. The machine had gone completely crazy first. Maybe it is one of the eternal verities that machine thinking makes no small mistakes, but only big ones. Then, too, consider that the robot cannot work without human direction and control. Eric's life-giving levers are set in motion by a man pushing buttons. The stroller in London's West End could never walk alone. Televox answers the phone only when called upon to do so by Wensley or someone else equally acquainted with his inner workings. Without the lone operator at his board 3 miles away, the robot army in the Edison plant would have perpetual leisure. Thus, while the events foreshadowed in RUR have come to pass in a measure, a realization of the dream of thinking machines is nowhere within the range of actual possibility. What then does this interesting development really mean to all of us? Does it mean that, before long, most of the work of the world will be done by robots? Will the man of affairs soon go to his office in an automobile driven by a mechanical chauffeur who will be directed at busy intersections and perchance bawled out too by a mechanical traffic cop? Will that same businessman, at lunchtime, be waited on by a robot waiter and, in the evening, be guided to his theater seat by a robot usher? Will his wife have a mechanical lady's maid to hook her up and back, and his children a robot nurse to wash their morning faces and take them to school? Perhaps. But in any event, the robot and his development on a large and scientific scale will result in at least one great benefit to mankind. In the words of a high official of the New York Edison Company, "The mechanical man and his ultimate universal practical application will rid humanity of much drudgery and thousands of uncongenial tasks." Men thus freed from unpleasant chores, he declared, never need fear unemployment in a well-organized society, but on the contrary may look forward to a better opportunity for the development of their inherent talents and intellectual powers. They will receive the gift of leisure, which will enable them to apply their released energies to the achievement of a finer, fuller life than they can enjoy at present.